Hello students, hope you are having a good day today. So this video that I'm creating is going to be over Access Chapter 3, which deals with queries. This is some of the harder material that we will be dealing with in this class, and so it deserves a video. Now for this video I'm going to be using a file, and this file is actually available to you if you would like to follow along with us during the recording of this. Where you can go is you can go to our Canvas site, and in our Canvas site under the files link there will be a Access database called Prof H Cap Review. You can download that database and work along with me in doing these things and trying to accomplish them yourself. If you would like to, you can during each slide you can pause the video and try to do the task prior to me doing it, so that way you can see if you do it correctly or if you may understand what you're being asked to perform. Okay, so once again you can download this. When you download it, it should look like this. You will have 4 tables in here, and we're going to utilize these some of these tables to create our queries. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. Once again, Access Chapter 3. Now, right away we're already going back to Chapter 2, but there is something that I need to discuss in Chapter 2 that I think is very important for your future success, okay, especially when it comes to the test. And that's mainly about the lookup fields from Chapter 2 that you were taught. Okay, if you remember, when you create a lookup field, there's a couple of ways you can do it. My preferred way is always in Design View. In Design View, I can come here, create Lookup Wizard, and it will give me values. It'll say, do you want to create a field to get values from another table or query, or you will type in those values. So these are 2 different things. If I want to get it from a different table or query, then this is going to create a relationship between the 2 tables. Okay, it's going to create a relationship between the 2 tables. If you just type them in, then whenever you go to that box, the only things that will be available are whatever you typed in. And then you can go back and add to that if necessary later on. But I want to mainly focus on this first one, and I want to show you if you accidentally mess up on this first one, what you can do to fix that problem. So let's go ahead. I'm going to cancel this right quick. I'm going to delete this because I've already got 2 lookup fields that I've created in patient ID and doctor ID. So when I come to this patient ID, doctor ID, or doctor ID field, I can go down in the field properties and go to the lookup tab. When I go to the lookup tab, I will see these options down here, all of these things, and these things have different meanings, right? But what I'm really focusing on is the fact that this was created from so I used the doctor's table and the field doctor ID in the doctor's table to create a link and provide me the information from that table in order to select doctors for a specific patient and their diagnosis. Okay? So, whenever I create a lookup field that is between two tables, or a table and a query, or something to that nature, what it does is it creates a relationship between that. Now, unfortunately, this does not have the relationship created already. The reason that it doesn't have the relationship created already is because I deleted it a while back. So this is an old file that I deleted the relationship already between them. Even though it still shows it, the lookup field, there's no relationship. Typically what you'll see is something like this. You'll see a relationship, and it may have an infinity sign and a 1, or a 1 and an infinity sign on it. Either way, the first thing you need to do is right click and delete that relationship. Okay, and when it asks me if I want to permanently delete it, I'm going to say yes. Okay. Now, sometimes when you are dealing with relationships, you should always note that it is best practice. And I didn't do this. I didn't get that error message, and I'm surprised. But it is best practice to close down your fields, okay? Your tables and queries and anything else you might be in, forms, reports. Close down every other tab besides the relationship tab, and then edit your relationships. Okay? So now that we've disconnected our doctor's ID field in the doctor's table from our diagnosis, the doctor ID field in our diagnosis table, what we're going to do, we're going to save the relationships, and then we're going to go to the diagnosis table. We're going to go to the back end view, or design view, and we're going to go to the lookup, and we're going to change where it says combo box. We're going to change it from a combo box to just a text box. Okay? So now we've enabled ourselves to redo the lookup wizard. Now I can do the lookup wizard. I'm going to get my stuff from that field. I'm going to get which table or query is going to provide the information. It's going to be the doctor's table. And I'm going to say that the doctor ID, I want the doctor ID. There we go. And next, maybe I want it ascending by doctor ID. Next, make sure that it all fits. Next, I'm going to enable data integrity because I don't want somebody being able to type in a doctor ID that is not included in the doctor's table. Meaning that we may have a doctor ID that doesn't, in our diagnosis table, that doesn't match to a doctor in the doctor's table. That can cause a lot of issues. So we don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and finish. Okay, so the table must be saved. Yes. And you'll notice that it came back, the combo box. And now I'm going to go back to the relationships window. I want to show you. See our relationship. Now we have a relationship, a one-to-many relationship between the doctor ID and the doctor's table and the doctor ID and the diagnosis table. Once again, if I messed up on that, if I didn't do something correctly, all I need to do is come to my relationship window, delete this relationship, get on the line, right click, delete the relationship. All right, so once again, let's get on the line, right click on that line, delete the relationship, then go back to the table which I created the lookup field in, and come to the lookup property, or the lookup tab under the field properties, change it from a combo box to a text box, and then see, I'm over here. So combo box, oops, there we go. Combo box to a text box. and then I can go back and redo the lookup wizard. Right now, if I'm doing the lookup wizard, and it's just a list, I'm just creating a list. What you'll see here, you'll still see combo box. All you need to do if you did that and you want to redo it because you messed up somewhere, just come over here and click on text box and redo it. All right, redo the lookup wizard. So that's if you entered in the values yourself. All right. So that's what I wanted to show you, how to fix a lookup field if you mess up. That can be important to you on your test. I want to ensure your success. So there we go. All right. Okay, so let's go on to what is next? Creating queries. Okay, so very quickly, what I would like to do is discuss the difference between Simple Query Wizard and Design View, creating a query in Design View. So going back, let's go ahead and close all of our things. Sure, we'll save the relationship. So we're going to go to Create, and we have two options, Query Wizard and Query Design. Now, the choice between these two is really, it's up to you in order to be able to make what you want to do. Okay? Basically, what I mean by that is that it doesn't matter really which one you choose to do unless you're specifically told to do it a certain way. There are a couple of queries that you will probably have to do in Query Wizard, and those would be the find duplicates and find unmatched. The reason I say this is because whenever you create a query, a simple query can be done in Design View, and so can cross tab. Okay, so if I do a Design View query, you can see I have an option to do cross tab, and I also have an option to do a simple query, which is just a select query in most instances. Okay, so really it's your preference. Now, when you're doing a query in Design View, if you are lucky, right, fortunate, you may have this box over here, there's pane over here, that will show your tables in your current database. Tables may even be queries or links that you have. So this one is showing the tables. In this, I can double click a table, any table that I wish to have in there, and it goes in there. Now, I'm going to remove the tables as such. Okay, remove. Now, if I don't see this option, okay, I can click on the Add Tables button here, and that would pop it up. Or I can just come over here, click on a table, and drag it in. Okay, so don't double click, just click on it and drag it in. All right. Or I can select all of them if I wish. So I can select the first one, hold down Shift, and select the last one, and just drag them all in as such. Okay, so once again, I'm going to show you how to do that again. Don't worry. Let me just remove all these tables. Remove them all. So if I wanted to drag all of them in, I would select the first one, hold down the Shift key, select the last one, and drag them all in as such. Now, filling in the fields from your different tables, okay, you can do this in a couple of ways. You can take your field over here, your fields that are in these different tables. So these are your tables, these are the fields under it. Never input this star field when you're doing this. Only input everything under that. All right, just trust me on this. It'll save you a headache. Okay, so the doctor, let's say I want something, a query with the doctor ID and doctor name field from the doctor's table, the patient ID, first name, last name from the patient table, and the diagnosis from the diagnosis table. Okay, so we can see that it comes whenever we've created this query. We see that, hey, we have the doctor ID from the doctor table, doctor ID field from the doctor table. Underneath that, I can sort either ascending or descending. Okay, ascending or descending. And if I want to show or hide this table, I just select this key. So when it's checked, it's showing. When it's unchecked, it's hidden. And then underneath that is where I put my criteria when I'm doing my search. Okay, when I'm doing my queries, that's where I put my criteria. Now, so that is how you can select fields from different tables using the design view. Let's say, okay, so the way to do this, again, so whenever you see this cursor turn black, as you do now, you can click on the field, hold down shift, go to the last field, your cursor should be black again, hold down, click on that while still holding shift, right click and say cut, and it will remove those fields from the from this pane down here. All right, the query pane. All right, so let's say I want all the fields from the doctor's table. All right, I want all the fields from the doctor's table. If I would like all the fields from the doctor's table, I can select the first field in the doctor's table under the star, the first field under the star, and then select, hold down shift, and select the last field. And then I can drag it down and pop it all in. Okay, so once again, first field, hold down shift, hold down shift and select, click on the last field, and then click and drag them all down. Okay? So that is the way you can do this in, that is the way you can do this in design view, creating queries. So I'm going to cut those. All right. Let's see here. Go ahead and do that. The other way you can create queries is through Query Wizard. And if we just create a simple query, right, we can select the table that we wish the query to come from, or the fields to come from. So if I need multiple tables, I'm just going to have to select them each. I can double click on the fields that I want. I want the doctor name, maybe under the patient. I want the patient first name and then last name. All right, and then from the diagnosis table again, after that, I want the diagnosis, the date of initial visit, and the date diagnosed. Maybe I want all of that. And then go. So it's telling me that there's an issue. And the issue is I don't have a relationship between the patient ID field in the diagnosis table and the patient ID field in the patient table. Now, the reason that this is an issue is because the only way you can create queries that utilize multiple tables or even other queries is if you have a connection to the data in some sense. And what that means is that there has to be a relationship created between the two tables. If there's not a relationship created between the two tables, then you cannot. So the relationship can even be passive. And what that means is if I created a relationship between the patient ID field and the diagnosis table. Okay, wait, let me show you. What that means is if I created a relationship between the patient ID field and the diagnosis table, let's just do that, maybe it'll let me, and the patient and the doctor ID field, okay, the patient ID field in the diagnosis table, and then I created a relationship between the doctor's table and the diagnosis table using the doctor ID field. Now I can link the patient, any field, I can use any field in the patient's table along with a field in the fields from the doctor's table because I've created a pass-through link. Okay, these are technically now linked together. All right, they're linked together by their relationship in the diagnosis table. All right, so let's go. Let's save that. And if I created that now, it should not give me a problem. So from the diagnosis table, I'm going to have patient. Let's just do it this way. From the patient table, okay, I'm going to have patient ID, patient first name, patient last name. From the doctor table, I'm going to have doctor ID, doctor name. Okay, and then from the diagnosis table, I'm going to have their diagnosis, date of initial visit, date diagnosed. All right, and I'll click next, and click next. Now I can rename the query right here if I wish to, and I can either open the query in Datasheet view. Okay, this one opens it in Datasheet view. This one opens it in Design view. I'm going to open it in Design view, and there we go. And now, as I stated, I have a connection, a pass-through connection that allows me to create this query utilizing these tables because I have these relationships between them. Okay. Once again, if I did not have those relationships between them, I could not create this. Okay. So, I'm going to go ahead and delete those. I'm going to go ahead and close this. No, because I'm not going to save that query. All right. So that was your creating queries using Design View or Wizard, Query Wizard. All right. Okay. Going on, after we've learned how to create or when we can utilize Query Wizard and Design View, those different instances. Now what we're going to look at and start with is the learning about text criteria. Okay. So when you're dealing with queries, okay, queries utilize criteria basically to filter out data that does not meet the standards you wish. So we use queries every day, okay, and most of us don't realize we're actually querying, but we are. So the way that we query is that we use things like Google, or you use your contact list to find a phone number, right? You use a search in your contact list to find a phone number, or you use a search in your music playlist or your music whatever music tool you may use to find a specific song. those searches are actually queries. You're querying a database and calling information that matches to a specific percentage what you are desiring to find. Okay? So that's the way we need to think about this. Now, when we are talking about criteria, when we're talking about the criteria, we have text criteria, and then we'll go over numeric and date criteria as well. Now, it is very important that we know and understand exactly what type of data is found in our database. And what I mean by that, so let's go to here. So if I'm going to query a specific table, let's say I was going to query the diagnosis table for information, okay, for information on some diagnoses, okay. One of the things that I need to be aware of is I need to be aware of, number one, what data is in each of my fields. Okay, what data is in each of my fields? Okay, over here I have a patient ID data type. That's the field name. We have a doctor ID. We have a diagnosis, a date of initial visit, a date diagnosed, medication prescribed, and whether or not there's a refill. These different fields have different data types, and you can find the data type by clicking in fields or going into the back end and looking at the data type right here. So we're clicking, this has a short text, diagnosis short text. This should not be short text. This should be a date field. So we should change that. This is not something that needs to be. This can mess up a query if we were doing that. So if you look in the database and you notice that some of your data is off, you see that these are dates, but they weren't in a date field. They weren't in a date time data type. They were in a short text data type. That can be a problem for you. All right, and it can be a problem when you're trying to query. You might be trying to query the date of the initial visit. Okay, so we'll change that to short or to date time for now, so that way we don't have problems in the future. Okay. Now, the reason I tell you need to know what type of data you have, as well as what resides in your database, in the different fields, is because if I ask you to query a specific field for a specific thing, like I want you to query this diagnosis table, I want you to query the diagnosis field, all right, create a text criteria in the diagnosis field where I want to see all individuals who have bronchitis, who have been diagnosed with bronchitis. Okay, if I told you that, I would want to know how bronchitis is spelt in the diagnosis table, because if I do not spell it correctly in my query, I'm not going to come back with the correct results. I'm not going to come back with the correct results. So it is very important that you know that the spelling is correct, that you know exactly where. Let's say it doesn't tell you to, it just says, give me all the patients who have been diagnosed with bronchitis. All right, provide to me all the patients who have been diagnosed with bronchitis. If that were the case, and I did not know which field bronchitis is found in, then I can use my table and find out, well, patient ID doesn't have bronchitis, doctor ID doesn't have bronchitis, diagnosis, I see bronchitis here. So my query, my criteria of bronchitis needs to go in the diagnosis field. So it needs to go in the criteria section under the diagnosis field. All right. So let's go ahead and see what I mean. All right. First, using all fields from the diagnosis table, create a query to find all patients who have been diagnosed with gallstones. Name the query gallstones. So, we're going to go over here. I'm going to delete this query right quick. We're going to go over here to create. I'm going to do this one in query design. And once again, if I don't have this add tables, I can click on this button, or I can just click and drag to pull the table in. I want all fields, so I'm going to select the first field, go to the last field and hold down shift and select that field. Then I'm going to drag them down just like that into my pane down here, this window. All right. Now, what did I want to query? I wanted to query to find all patients who have been diagnosed with gallstones. Well, we just found out, right, that if we, once again, do not know where we need to enter gallstones, where can we find gallstones? See, if I just put gallstones in the first one, thinking, oh, I'm going to find all patients with gallstones, and I run this, I'm not going to get any results. But is that true? Is that true? Do we have 0 results for gallstones? And the answer is, well, that depends. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. How do we check? We go to the diagnosis table. In the diagnosis table, we look and we can filter for gallstones if they have it. If we have it. We see that we should get 17 patients, 17 different patients who have had gallstones from this table. So our query should produce this result. This is how you check your queries. You can check your queries by doing this. Okay, coming in and filtering out the data as necessary. Now, some of the more complicated queries, it's a little bit harder, and I'll show you later on about that. But once again, we're in the diagnosis table. We're looking at how many people have been diagnosed with gallstones. So is our query correct? 0 patients have been diagnosed with gallstones. No, it is not. Obviously, we have done something incorrect, so we need to go back and see what we did incorrect. What we did incorrect is we have our criteria in the wrong field. Gallstones aren't found in patient ID. Gallstones are found in diagnosis. So we're going to take that and run it, and we're going to see we got 17 patients. 17 patients with gallstones. Okay? So, and that was what we came out with over here. So we can be reasonably assured that every patient who had gallstones is now showing in this query. All right? Now, do you want to save the changes to the design of query 1? Yes. Now I can rename it. Let's say I forgot to rename it and I have it over here in my navigation pane. If I have it over here in my navigation pane, if I have it over here in the navigation pane, what I can do is I can right click on my query, rename it. And now what did I want to rename it? Name the query gallstones. So right click, rename gallstones. There we go. In SimNet, you will not be able, or you will not get credit if your tables are not named correctly. Your tables, queries, forms, reports. If they are named incorrectly, you will not get credit for them. Okay, you must name your stuff correctly. So that's gallstones, the gallstones query. Let's go down to the next query. So It says, using the patient ID, doctor ID, and diagnosis fields from the diagnosis table, create a query to find all the diagnoses from doctor IDs that begin with DGPT. Name the query TK patients. All right. So, once again, using the patient ID, doctor ID, and diagnosis fields. I'm going to use the query wizard this time. And the query wizard, I'm going to do a simple query. And I'm going to not make sure that I select the appropriate table from which, or query that I want my data to come from. So I wanted patient ID, doctor ID, diagnosis. All right. Patient ID, doctor ID, diagnosis fields from the diagnosis table. Going to create a query. So we did that. There we go. Open the query to view information. We're going to modify this in design view. Now remember, you can rename the query here. We're going to rename it TK patients. TK patients. There we go. And we're going to finish. All right. So now we have our query created. The thing we want to do is we're going to find all the diagnosis from doctor IDs that begin with DGPT. DGPT. So we already know, because of the context clues, it tells us exactly what field we need to put our criteria in right here, doctor IDs. But it says DGPT. Now, if I type in here DGPT and I run this query, I'm going to get 0 records. Okay, I'm going to get 0 records. Now, why am I getting 0 records, and should I get 0 records? Well, 2 things. Number one, I can go and check the doctor's table. All right, I'm going to go check the doctor's table to see if there are even doctors who have a DGPT ID. Okay, so we can come here, we can do a text filter, and we can say begins with DGPT. Hit enter. Well, we see we should at least get 1 doctor. Okay, there's at least 1 doctor with that. Now, has that doctor seen any patients? Well, that can be a next question. Doctor ID, text filter, begins with DGPT. Well, yes, they've seen 75 patients, in fact. Okay, they've seen 75 patients, in fact, and that means that we should have 75 records in this query. We don't, though. So why don't we have it? Why don't we have it? Well, the reason is somewhat simple, and that is because whenever we are doing a query, whenever we are querying a database, okay, in Access, the words that you spell must, so the things that you use as text criteria must include all the letters or characters in that specific field. So what I mean by that, like gallstones. Let's go back to gallstones very quick and I'll show you. Okay, so we know that we have 17, we're supposed to have 17 results. If I come over here and notice how I have gallstones right now, I have gallstone. If I run that, all I did was I left out 1 letter, gallstone, and I didn't put the S at the end. I left out 1 letter, and all of a sudden I'm missing everything. That is because it is running to show exact matches. It is saying it must be spelled this way in order for you to bring back results. It must be spelled this specific way. So when you have quotes around something, DGPT, when you have quotes around it, it's telling your your database, it must be spelled like this exactly. It can't have characters before, can't have characters after. If it can only show this text. Now, the way that we fight through this is by using wildcards. Okay, wildcards. There are two wildcards. One is a question mark, and the other is an asterisk. When you are using the question mark only fills in for a single character. Okay? For a single character. And what that means is, once again, let me go back to gallstones. If I wanted to see, maybe we had some doctors or some people were misspelling gallstones and they were calling them gallstones, G-U-L-L-S-T-O-N-S. Okay, maybe they were accidentally doing that. So instead of putting a G-A there, what I can do is I can put a G question mark L-L-S-T-O-N-S. And what this will do was this will provide me with all of the spellings of gallstone where the A is not an A. Or where this, so the letter after G, the character after G can be anything, is what I should say. Okay? So this would provide me with all of the spellings. It could be G1, L-L-S-T-O-N-S. Okay? It doesn't matter. Whatever character comes after G, it's a random character. And we're saying I want you to pull back anything, any words that have G, another character, L-L-S-T-O-N-E-S. Okay? So that's what that does. That question mark only fills in for one character. Okay? Now we're not going to save that. We're going to come back here. The asterisk on the other hand means 0 or more characters. Okay, 0 or more characters. So if I were to put an asterisk at the beginning of a letter, or at the beginning of okay, sorry. So if I were to put an asterisk, going back to gallstones, I should just not get out of this. So if I were to put an asterisk at the beginning of this box and then put an S after it, okay, what this is telling me, what this is telling the system, is I want to find all diagnoses that end in the letter S. So when I run this, notice it's going to give me every diagnosis that ends in the letter S. So if it doesn't end in an S, it won't give it to you. Okay? Now, if I did this, where I did S star or asterisk, and I ran it, that means I want everything that begins with the letter S. So it begins with the letter S. And then if I put an S in between two stars, right, then it shows me everything that has an S in it. It doesn't matter where this S is. Look at this. This doesn't start with a varicose eczema. This doesn't start with an S, but it has an S in it. Restless leg syndrome, right? Doesn't start with an S, doesn't end with an S, but there are multiple S's in it. Okay? So that's what the star means. Now let me show you if I did an S and a question mark here. So S question mark, and I run. I'm not getting anything. Not getting anything because the question mark only does one character. Okay, so if I did S question mark, and I just did a lot of different question marks, what would happen then? Okay, so, oops. what would happen then? Well, we don't know because we have so many. We have a bunch of different words, and we have to know the length of those words. So if you don't have enough question marks to match the number of letters, you're not going to get any results. But once again, a question mark only can only do one letter. If I did Gol, S-T-O-N-E-S, okay, so there you go. I would have to know exactly how many letters are in this word in order to put everything like that. Or what's just easier is if I do a G like so with a star, and then I can get everything and I can see gallstones included. All right. So with that being said, we're going to do a query that finds all the diagnoses from the doctor IDs that begin with DGPT. So under doctor ID, I need to come to DGPT. And then what do I need to do? Is DGPT, it says, is at the beginning. Now we need to say, do we know how many characters come after DGPT? And the answer is, no, we don't. We weren't giving any indication in our task to say how many characters. So the safest bet is to use an asterisk. Here, because an asterisk symbolizes that it can have 0 characters after this, so it can just be DGPT, or it can be DGPT, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, all those things. So it could have up to a set number, however many characters are allowed in this particular field. Okay, so when we do this and we run it, we go to run, notice we get our 75 results, which is exactly what was here. All right, so that concludes the text criteria. Now we're going to move on to the number and date criteria. So numeric and date criteria. Okay. Before we get into the, getting to an example of date criteria or number criteria, in this instance we're going to do date, I want to have a quick discussion about ascending and descending as far as numbers and dates are concerned. Okay, when we are, I gotta hide that. When we are doing our dates, so let's go ahead and close these. Or let's not close that one. Let's close that one. Nope. Okay. So when we're doing our date criteria, okay, our number criteria, we may be asked to do things ascending or descending based on numbers or dates. So we need to know what that means. And it actually, we need to understand, because it may tell us to order the dates from oldest to the newest. So that would mean from further back in time all the way to the most recent dates, or from the newest dates to the oldest dates, which mean the most recent dates to today to the furthest away dates. So when we do this and we're in a date field, okay, we could actually see what ascending and descending mean. Okay, when we see this. Ascending is to sort from oldest, so that means the furthest back date all the way to the most recent date. So sorting ascending is the furthest back date to the newest date. And then sorting descending is the newest date all the way back to the oldest date. So the descending, newest to oldest. Okay? Alright. So ascending, it's going to be furthest back, so you can think of it as, to when you were born, all the way up to today. Descending is the furthest, or the closest to today, all the way back to whenever you want to go. Okay, there we go. So that's how the ascending and descending works on dates. Ascending and descending works on numbers in a similar fashion. When we're ascending in numeric values, it goes from the lowest number, so that can be, you can think of it from 1 to infinity, all right, or negative infinity to positive infinity. And then when you're descending, it goes from positive infinity to negative infinity. All right. So once again, numeric dates, numeric numbers. It goes from, if you're ascending, it goes from negative infinity all the way to infinity. And then if you're descending, it goes from the positive infinity all the way to the negative infinity. Okay? So we can just think of it, if you're doing 1 to 1,000, ascending would be 1 is the first one, 1,000 is the last one. Descending would be 1,000 is the first one, 1 is the last one. All right. So now that we've kind of understood that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about being able to use operators on dates. Okay. This is very important. So give me one. So using operators on dates can be fairly tricky, and really when you are doing the queries, knowing which operator to use may not be so clear. It may not be spelled out exactly in your task. So you will need to know how to interpret words in order to use the correct operators. And when I'm talking about operators, I am discussing the greater than symbol, the less than symbol. Okay, so greater than, I was always taught alligator mouth, so the alligator mouth is pointing towards the front of the box. Okay, and the less than symbol, the alligator mouth is pointing to the back of the box. Then you have the equal to symbol. This is greater than or equal to, and it needs to be written as such, greater than or equal to, and then less than or equal to. So this is greater than, less than, equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. But what we really care about is when to use these operators. Okay, when to use these operators and how to use them properly. So let's go for a second to Excel. So I want to show you a couple of things that may interest you and may make this a little easier for you to understand, right? Because the concept in Excel also matches the concept in Access. Your program, your program assigns specific values to pretty much everything you write or type or do in it, okay? In this instance, it assigns values to dates as well, okay? So, I want to show you the value of the date 1/1/1900 all the way to the value of the date of 1/22/1900. So if I select all of these, and you can see they're in a date type format, and I come and I put them in a general format. Notice that 1/1/1900 turned into 1, and 1/22/1900 turned into number 22. So what this says is that numbering of dates starts at 1/1/1900 and goes all the way to today, which is 2/11/2021. And what is the date value of 2/11/2021? Why, it's 44,238. So that means the date value of 2/10/2021 should be 44,237, and the date value of 2/12/2021 should be 44,239. Okay? So when we're talking about these dates then, and we're talking about operators greater than, less than, equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Okay? When we're talking about that, today's date is greater than yesterday date, but it is less than tomorrow date. Okay, and that would be the date value. So if I wanted, given this information, if I wanted to find all the dates that came before 2/11/2021, if I want to find all the dates that came before, what symbol should I use? Which of these symbols should I use? Okay, so I'm saying find all dates that came before 2/11/2021. What symbol should I use in front of 2/11/2021? Okay. Well, if we think about it, today's date is greater than yesterday's date. So if I were doing a comparison of dates, and I said 2/10/2021, so 2/10/2021 is what when compared to 2/11/2021? And the answer is it is less than 2/11/2021. So when I am creating a criteria for a date, and I want to find all dates that came before a specific date, I need to use the less than symbol. So the alligator mouth should be opening towards the back of the box. The back of the box. If I wanted to find all dates, don't do that. Sorry. If I wanted to find all dates that came after 2/11/2021, then the alligator mouth would go the other way. And that's because, as we said before, right? 2/12/2021 is greater than 2/11/2021. So your operator always must come in front of the date that you are looking for. All right, so it always must come from before the date you are trying to enter in. So I have on sheet 2 here, now that we've seen this, I have some helpful tips on here. So on, if you see the words on, as far as date, that means it's inclusive. It wants you to include that date, okay, in your search. So if it says on or after or on or before, you're going to use the equal sign, and then you're going to use another operator for after or before. Okay, so on or after, or sorry, on is the equal sign. On or after is greater than or equal to when it comes to dates. On or before is less than or equal to when it comes to dates. After is greater than when it comes to dates, and less than is before, or before is less than when it comes to dates. Remember, because on, we're just looking for if we were, on 2/11/2021. We don't care about any other dates. But if we said on or after, we care about 2/11/2021 and all the dates into the future. And then if we did this, it would be all dates into the past, including 2/11/2021. This one would be all dates into the future. And this one would be all dates into the past, excluding 2/11/2021. Let me write that there. So all excluding 2/11/2021. So that was just if we were using 2/11/2021 as our basis. Okay? So there you go. I hope that helps when it comes to doing this. It'll help you in this next piece right here. So what we're going to do is, using the patient ID, doctor ID, diagnosis, and date diagnosed fields from the diagnosis table, we're going to create a query to find all the diagnoses that occurred on or after 1/1/2019. So on or after, when we look at this, we can come to on or after, and we can see it is greater than or equal to. So we know on or after means greater than or equal to here. Then we're going to name this recently diagnosed. Okay, so let's go to our queries. I'm going to show you another way that you can create queries, and it's by copying the query. Okay, so in this one, it's saying for us to use the patient ID, doctor ID, diagnosis, and date diagnosed fields. What I can do is I can copy. I know this query has, or this query, either one really, they both have the majority of the fields that I want. So I'm just going to copy this query. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go copy. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste. And I'm going to rename this query recent diagnosis. Recent diagnosis. Okay, there we go. So now this is called recent diagnosis, and when I open it, I'm going to cancel that. So I'm going to open it, and I see that I have the patient ID, doctor ID, and diagnosis fields. Okay, now when I go to the design view, you can see that I still have the DGPT asterisk in the criteria field for the diagnosis under doctor ID. We don't want that for this. Make sure you're still in this, you're in the correct query. We don't want that. In fact, we're going to need to add the date diagnosed field. Okay, we're going to need to add the date diagnosed field to our query. And in this one, what we're going to do is we're going to create it to where it finds all diagnoses that occurred on or after 1/1/2019. So on or after, we said that's greater than or equal to. Greater than or equal to, because we want to include 1/1/2019, and we want all dates into the future. So whenever we run this, we're going to see that we are given dates after 1/1/2019. So to check that, we can come over here to our diagnosis table. We always go and check, right? We always go and check. We have 35 instances, and now what we're going to do, we're going to see if that's correct. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say, come to this after filter for the date diagnosed. Now what you need to look at on this is, and read, is this date diagnosed is on or after. Now you need to realize that if it's on or after, if this says on or after, that means that it's including the date you put in. So if we wanted to include 1/1/2019, so what we do there is we put date diagnosed is on or after 1/1/2019, because that's what we want to include. We want to include that. We get 35 results. Okay? Now, what if it was just after 1/1/2019? What if this said, instead of saying on or after, it just said after 1/1/2019? Well, in this case, what we would do, instead of 1/1, we would put 1/2, because that is on. We want to include 1/2 and every date after that, but we didn't want to include 1/1. Okay? So if this just had after, 1/1 instead of on or after, we would need to move the date up 1 when we're doing our check over here in the diagnosis table. Okay? But since we wanted to include the 1/1/2019, we just do that. Okay. Let's go ahead, and we're going to move on from numeric and date criteria, and we're going to talk about using and. Okay? Using and.